The fog clung to the ancient stones of Moonstone Tower like a shroud, as the full moon cast an ethereal glow over the sprawling estate in the English countryside. It was the autumn of 1935, and the air hummed with unspoken tensions among the gathered guests. Lord Archibald Harrington, the tower's imperious master, paced his opulent study, his face etched with worry. Suddenly, a piercing scream shattered the night. Rushing servants found him slumped over his desk, a jeweled dagger protruding from his chest, blood pooling like ink on priceless parchments. Who among the household harbored such lethal malice? The little Belgian detective Hercule Poirot would soon unravel the enigma. Chapter 1. The Invitation to Shadow. The train exhaled a long, mournful sigh as it slowed on the final stretch of track, iron wheels grinding against frost-kissed rails. Outside the window, the moor rolled away in undulating waves of heather and gorse, all silvered by the moon and shrouded in drifting ribbons of fog. It was the sort of landscape that swallowed sound and memory alike, and Hercule Poirot, seated in solitary splendor in his first-class compartment, allowed himself a small, appreciative smile. Nature, he reflected, had a flair for the dramatic that even the most theatrical murderer might envy. He adjusted the precise creases of his pinstriped trousers and glanced at the telegram folded neatly in his gloved hand. The paper was heavy, expensive, embossed with a crest, a tower wreathed in laurel beneath which a moonstone glimmered like a drop of frozen starlight. The message itself was terse, almost peremptory in its urgency. Poirot's mustaches, those magnificent symmetrical works of art, twitched with anticipation. Lord Harrington was not a man given to idle panic, a baronet of ancient lineage, a collector of Renaissance bronzes, a financier whose investments spanned 3 continents. Such a man did not summon the continent's most celebrated detective for trifles. No, something festered beneath the polished surface of Moonstone Tower, something that required the meticulous order of Poirot's little gray cells. The train lurched to a halt at a tiny platform where a single gas lamp flickered against the encroaching dark. A porter in a threadbare greatcoat hurried forward, breath pluming in the chill. "Monsieur Poirot? Carriage is waiting, sir." Poirot descended with the measured dignity of a man who believed punctuality to be the politeness of kings. The motor car, a gleaming Rolls-Royce Phantom II, its paint the color of midnight, stood purring softly, its chauffeur rigid at attention. The crest on the door matched the telegram exactly. "Bonsoir," Poirot greeted the chauffeur, who touched his cap in silent acknowledgement. The door closed with a soft, expensive thud, and the car glided forward into the fog. For 20 minutes they wound along a narrow road that climbed steadily upward, the headlights carving tunnels through the mist. Occasionally the moon broke through, revealing jagged outcrops of millstone grit and the skeletal branches of wind-stunted oaks. Then abruptly the fog parted like a theater curtain, and Moonstone Tower rose before them. It was magnificent in the way only English Gothic could be, part fortress, part folly, part ancestral dream. The central keep dated to the 14th century, its walls blackened by centuries of peat smoke and Yorkshire rain. Flanking it were Elizabethan wings of mellowed brick, their chimneys exhaling lazy spirals into the night. At the very summit, a single tower, slender, octagonal, crowned with battlements, caught the moonlight on a dome of pale stone that gleamed like the moonstone of its name. Windows glowed amber, promising warmth, yet the overall impression was one of watchful isolation, as though the house itself observed the approach of strangers with ancient, unblinking eyes. The gravel crunched beneath the tires as the car swept into a courtyard flanked by yew hedges clipped into severe, geometric shapes. A fountain at the center depicted a stone maiden pouring water from an urn. The water had frozen mid-spill, creating a crystalline sculpture that glittered under the carriage lamps. The front door, oak-bound with iron studded like a medieval shield, swung open before the chauffeur could knock. A tall, gaunt man stood silhouetted against the blaze of the entrance hall. He wore the formal black of a butler, but there was something military in the set of his shoulders, something haunted in the hollows beneath his cheekbones. His eyes, Poirot noted at once, were the color of winter skies, pale, penetrating, and utterly devoid of warmth. "Monsieur Poirot," the butler intoned, his voice a low, precise baritone, "His lordship is expecting you. This way, if you please." Poirot stepped across the threshold into a vast hall that smelled of beeswax, wood smoke, and the faint metallic tang of old stone. A fire roared in a fireplace large enough to roast an ox. Above the mantel, a portrait of a cavalier in buff coat and lace collar glared down with aristocratic disdain. Suits of armor stood sentinel along the walls, their visors lowered as if guarding secrets. The butler, Graves, Poirot would later learn, relieved him of his overcoat and Homburg with the fluid efficiency of a man who had performed the ritual 10,000 times. "Lord Harrington is in the crimson drawing room," Graves murmured. "The family and guests are assembled for dinner. His lordship requested that you join them at once." Poirot's eyebrows ascended a fraction. "Assembled? But it is past 9 o'clock. His lordship keeps country hours when it suits him," Graves replied, a flicker of something, resentment, crossing his features before the mask of servility slid back into place. "This way." They traversed a corridor lined with tapestries depicting the Battle of Agincourt. Faded reds and golds, the faces of dying knights frozen in eternal agony. Poirot's patent leather shoes whispered over Persian runners so thick they seemed to swallow sound. From somewhere above came the muffled strains of a gramophone playing Debussy, the notes languid and slightly off-key. The crimson drawing room lived up to its name. Walls paneled in dark walnut were hung with silk the color of fresh blood. A chandelier of Venetian glass dripped light like molten topaz. A fire crackled in a hearth carved with gargoyles, and the air was heavy with the scent of hothouse roses and Havana cigars. 5 people turned as Poirot entered. 5 pairs of eyes assessed him with varying degrees of curiosity, suspicion, and veiled hostility. Lord Archibald Harrington dominated the room the way a lion dominates the savannah. He was a big man, broad-shouldered, with a mane of silver hair brushed back from a forehead like a granite cliff. His evening clothes were faultless, white tie, diamond studs that flashed like cold fire. But his face was flushed, the veins at his temples throbbing. In one hand he clutched a crystal tumbler half full of amber liquid. In the other, a cigar smoldered neglected. "Poirot!" he boomed, striding forward with the confidence of a man accustomed to command. "By God, you're a sight for sore eyes. Come in, come in. Forgive the theatrical hour, but needs must when the devil drives." Poirot inclined his head with exquisite courtesy. "Milord, your telegram suggested urgency." "I am, as always, at the service of truth." Harrington's laugh was a bark. "Truth, yes. We'll need buckets of it before this night is out." He gestured expansively. "Allow me to present the company." First was Lady Evelyn Harrington, seated on a brocade chaise longue, like a Renaissance Madonna translated into modern silk. She was perhaps 45, but grief or artifice had preserved a porcelain fragility. Her gown was midnight blue velvet, cut low to reveal a necklace of sapphires that matched her eyes that now regarded Poirot with the wariness of a deer scenting the hunter. A diamond bracelet glinted on one slender wrist, the other hand toyed with a fan of ostrich feathers. "My wife," Harrington said, the pride in his voice edged with something sharper. "Evelyn, this is the famous Hercule Poirot." Lady Evelyn extended a languid hand. "Monsieur." Your reputation precedes you like a storm cloud. Her voice was low, cultivated with the faintest trace of a continental accent, Viennese, perhaps. Next, lounging against the mantel with the studied insolence of youth, was Reginald Harrington. The son and heir was in his late 20s, handsome in the dissolute manner of those who have never been denied a pleasure. His dinner jacket was unbuttoned, his tie askew, and the glass in his hand was nearly empty. His eyes, Harrington eyes, the same storm gray as his father's, were bloodshot. "Reggie," Harrington grunted. "My boy, pay attention." Reginald raised his glass in a mock toast. "To the great detective. May he find whatever it is father's lost this time." His tone suggested that whatever had been lost was almost certainly money, and that he, Reginald, had probably spent it. Poirot's smile did not reach his eyes. "Enchanté, Monsieur Reginald. One finds that lost things have a habit of turning up in the most unexpected pockets." A ripple of tension passed through the room. Harrington cleared his throat. "And this is Miss Eliza Thorne, my niece." Eliza stood by the window, half in shadow, half in firelight. She was tall, angular, with the kind of bone structure that suggested falconry and cold castles. Her gown was severe black silk, relieved only by a single brooch, an onyx cameo carved with the family crest. Her hair, the color of burnished copper, was pinned in a style that managed to look both elegant and defiant. When she turned, Poirot saw that her eyes were green, bright as absinthe, and just as dangerous. "Miss Thorne," Poirot murmured, bowing over her hand. Her skin was cool, her grip firm. "Monsieur Poirot," she said, her voice crisp with public school vowels. "I trust you travel with a stout umbrella. The Moors have a way of drowning the unprepared." The final figure detached himself from the shadows near the gramophone. Victor Lang was smooth where the Harringtons were craggy. Smooth hair, smooth voice, smooth movements that suggested a man who oiled his way through life. His evening clothes were Italian, his cufflinks gold knots, his smile practiced to the point of pain. "Mr. Lang is my business associate," Harrington explained. "We've interests in rubber, tin, a railroad or two in Ceylon. Victor keeps the wolves from the door." Lang's handshake was warm, almost too warm. "A pleasure, Monsieur Poirot. Though I confess I'm curious. Does Lord Harrington require a detective or merely a referee?" Harrington's laugh was forced. "Both, perhaps. But come. Dinner waits for no man, not even murder." The word hung in the air like a dropped gauntlet. Graves materialized as if conjured, announcing in sepulchral tones, "Dinner is served, my lord." They processed into the dining room, a cavernous space paneled in oak darkened by centuries of candle smoke. The table was set for 6. Poirot noted the precision of the placement, the Waterford crystal, the silver epergnes overflowing with hothouse fruits. A portrait of Queen Victoria glowered down from above the sideboard as though disapproving of the company. Poirot found himself seated between Lady Evelyn and Eliza Thorne, with Harrington at the head and Lang opposite. Reginald slouched at the foot, already reaching for the claret. Graves and 2 footmen moved like ghosts, serving consommé madeleine in Sèvres bowls. Conversation began politely enough. Poirot complimented the clarity of the soup, inquired about the vintage of the Chateau Margaux, 1921, excellent, remarked upon the beauty of the Moonstone in the chandelier's central drop. But beneath the civility, currents swirled. Reginald drank steadily, his comments growing sharper. Father's latest scheme. Some railway in Ceylon, wasn't it, Lang? Bound to be another disaster, like the rubber plantation that went up in smoke. Lang's smile tightened. "Your father's vision is bold, Reggie. Visionaries are rarely appreciated in their own drawing rooms." Lady Evelyn's fan snapped open. "Really, Reginald? Must you air our laundry before a stranger?" "Poirot's no stranger," Harrington growled. "He's here because—" He caught himself, glanced at Graves, who was refilling water glasses with monastic concentration. "Because I asked him." Eliza leaned toward Poirot, her voice pitched low. "Uncle Archibald collects enemies the way other men collect stamps. One wonders which specimen has finally bitten back." Poirot sipped his wine, savoring the black-currant notes. "And you, mademoiselle, do you reside here permanently?" "Only when summoned," she replied. "I have a modest income from my late father's estate, or what remains after Uncle's stewardship." Her smile was sharp enough to cut glass. The fish course arrived, sole Veronique, the grapes plump and sweet. Poirot noted that Lady Evelyn barely touched her plate, that Lang's eyes followed her every movement, that Reginald's hand trembled slightly as he raised his glass. Harrington himself ate with the single-minded ferocity of a man staving off inner demons. Between courses, the gramophone in the drawing-room wound down into silence. In the hush, Poirot became aware of another sound, a faint, rhythmic ticking from somewhere within the walls. A clock, or something more sinister? "Tell me about the tower itself," Poirot said conversationally. "It is very ancient, non?" Harrington grunted. "Parts of it. The keep's Norman, William the Conqueror's time. The Moonstone Tower was added in the 17th century by my ancestor, Sir Gervase Harrington. Mad as a hatter, Gervase. Believed the stone at the top was a fragment of the moon fallen to earth. Said it granted visions." "Visions?" Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Of the future, perhaps, or the past," Eliza said softly. Family legend claims Sir Gervase foresaw his own death in the stone's reflections. Hanged himself from the battlements the next night. Reginald snorted. "Superstitious rot. The stone's just quartz. Pretty but worthless. Like most of Father's investments." Harrington's fist slammed the table, crystal jumping. "Enough! You'll show respect in this house, boy, or what?" Reginald's voice cracked like a whip. "You'll cut me off again? Send me to rusticate in some god-forsaken colony?" "I'm your only heir, Father. You need me." "I need peace," Harrington roared, "and by God he'll have it." Lady Evelyn rose gracefully. "Gentlemen, perhaps we might adjourn to the drawing-room. The port is excellent, and Monsieur Poirot has not yet seen the Moonstone itself." The suggestion broke the tension like a spell. Chairs scraped, napkins were laid aside. As they filed out, Poirot lingered ostensibly to admire a Reynolds portrait. In reality, he watched reflections in the polished silver. Lang's hand brushing Lady Evelyn's waist, Eliza's eyes narrowing, Graves' face as impassive as carved granite. In the drawing-room, coffee was served in eggshell porcelain. The fire had been built up. Shadows danced across the crimson walls like imps at a sabbat. Harrington poured brandy with a heavy hand. "Now," he said, sinking into a leather wing chair. "To business. Poirot, I didn't bring you here for dinner conversation. There's been trouble." "Trouble?" Poirot accepted a balloon glass, inhaling the cognac's bouquet. "Of what nature?" Harrington glanced at the others, then leaned forward. "Thefts, documents gone missing from my safe, threats, anonymous letters. And last week someone tampered with my car brakes. Could have killed me on the moor road." Reginald laughed, a brittle sound. "Probably one of your creditors, Father, or a disgruntled mistress." "Silence!" Harrington's face purpled. "This is no joking matter. Poirot, I want you to find out who's behind it. The house is locked tighter than the Bank of England, yet things vanish. Someone here." He broke off as Graves entered, bearing a silver salver. On it lay a single sheet of heavy cream paper folded once. "This was just delivered, my lord, by hand, through the servants' entrance." No messenger. Harrington snatched it up, unfolded it. His face drained of color. Wordlessly, he passed it to Poirot. Poirot turned the paper over. On the reverse, someone had drawn a crude sketch. The tower, with a noose dangling from its summit. The clock on the mantel chimed 11. Outside, the wind rose, rattling the casements like impatient fingers. Harrington drained his brandy in one gulp. "Well, Poirot, what do you make of that?" Poirot folded the note with deliberate care. "I make, my lord, that someone wishes to frighten you very much. But fear is a double-edged blade. It may cut the one who wields it." He glanced around the room. 5 faces? 5 masks? Which one concealed the hand that had typed those words? Lady Evelyn had gone pale beneath her rouge. Reginald stared into his glass as though it held answers. Eliza's fingers worried the onyx brooch. Lang smoked a cigarette with exaggerated calm. Graves stood by the door, hands clasped behind his back, expressionless. The gramophone in the corner suddenly crackled to life. Unprompted, the needle scratching across a record, a woman's voice, distorted and eerie, floated into the room. The clock struck the quarter hour. Somewhere in the house, a door slammed. Footsteps echoed overhead, rapid and irregular, then ceased abruptly. Harrington rose unsteadily. "I'm going to my study. Poirot, walk with me. The rest of you, stay here. Graves, lock the doors after us." As they stepped into the corridor, Poirot heard the key turn behind them. The passage was colder now, the gas jets hissing. Harrington's study lay at the far end, past a suit of armor that seemed to lean forward as they passed. Inside, the room was a scholar's paradise. Walls of leather-bound books, a partner's desk of burled walnut, a globe that spun silently on its axis. A fire burned low in the grate. On the desk lay scattered papers, a jeweled dagger that served as a letter opener, and Poirot's eyes narrowed, a small velvet box, open to reveal a moonstone the size of a pigeon's egg, its surface swirling with blue fire. Harrington locked the door behind them. "This is what they're after," he said, gesturing to the stone. "Family heirloom. Worth a fortune, but more than that, sentimental value. My mother wore it at her debut, and there are other matters." He moved to the safe concealed behind a false panel of books, spun the combination. The door swung open to reveal neat stacks of bonds, a velvet pouch that clinked with gold sovereigns, and empty spaces where documents should have been. See? Gone. The railway concessions, the rubber shares, poof, he slammed the safe shut. "I've changed the combination twice. Only I know it now." Poirot examined the safe, the desk, the dagger. "And the brakes on your motor car? Slashed clean through. Could have killed me." Harrington poured another brandy, hands shaking. "Poirot, I'm not a coward, but this house, it's like living in a tomb. Whispers in the walls, shadows that move when you're not looking." A sudden thud overhead made them both start. Dust sifted from the ceiling. Then silence. "Reginald's room," Harrington muttered. "Probably drunk again." Poirot's mind raced. The typed note, the gramophone message, the missing documents, the tampered brakes, all pointed to an insider. But which one? And why the elaborate theater? He was about to speak when a scream shattered the quiet. High, terrified, unmistakably female. It came from the direction of the drawing room. Harrington's glass slipped from his fingers, shattering on the hearth. "Evelyn." They ran. The corridor seemed longer now, the gas jets guttering. At the drawing room door, Graves was fumbling with keys, his composure cracked for the first time. "Stand aside!" Harrington bellowed. Together they shouldered the door. It gave with a splintering crack. The room was in chaos. The coffee table overturned, cups shattered. Eliza stood white-faced by the window. Reginald knelt over something on the rug. Lang was nowhere to be seen. And Lady Evelyn lay sprawled before the fireplace, a jeweled dagger. Poirot recognized it as the one from the study, protruding from her chest. Blood pooled beneath her like spilled claret, soaking into the crimson silk of the wall's reflection. But no. It was not Lady Evelyn. The gown was different, the hair darker. It was a maid, young, perhaps 20, her eyes wide and staring in death. Reginald looked up, face ashen. She came in with fresh coffee. Then, God, I don't know. One minute she was standing there, the next. Poirot knelt, examined the wound. Clean, precise, directly to the heart. The dagger's hilt bore the Harrington crest. And on the blade, just visible beneath the blood, a faint smear of something white. Powder? Graves appeared in the doorway, breathing hard. I was in the pantry, sir. Heard the scream. The outer doors are locked, bolted from inside. Poirot rose slowly. Then the killer is still among us. Overhead, the Moonstone tower loomed against the racing clouds, its pale dome catching the moonlight like a watchful eye. Somewhere in its shadow, a clock began to strike midnight. Chapter 2. Whispers in the hall. The scream had not yet died when the house itself seemed to inhale, holding its breath. Every candle flame leaned inward as though the walls themselves strained to listen. Poirot stood in the splintered doorway of the crimson drawing room, the scent of blood and beeswax thick in his nostrils, and felt the familiar tingle along his spine, the moment when chaos crystallizes into pattern. Lady Evelyn Harrington lay crumpled on the chaise longue, one hand pressed to her throat, the ostrich feather fan snapped in two. Reginald knelt beside the dead maid, Annie, Poirot would learn, his dinner jacket spattered with crimson. Eliza Thorne had backed against the window, the onyx cameo at her throat rising and falling with each shallow breath. Victor Lang was absent. The French doors to the terrace stood ajar, a rectangle of fog drifting in like a living thing. Graves, the butler, recovered first. "Lock the doors!" he barked to the footman who had materialized behind him. "No one leaves this room." His voice cracked on the last word, betraying the first fracture in his iron composure. Poirot stepped over the threshold, careful not to disturb the blood that had already begun to congeal into a dark mirror on the parquet. "No, no, do not touch her," he said softly as Reginald reached for the dagger. "The weapon remains until the police arrive. Monsieur Graves, telephone the constable at once. And someone, close those doors before the fog devours the evidence." The footman obeyed, slamming the French door shut. The click of the latch sounded unnaturally loud. Outside, the wind moaned around the tower like a mourner denied entrance. Poirot knelt beside the body. Annie had been pretty in a country way. Round cheeks, freckles, hair the color of ripe wheat now matted with blood. The dagger had entered just below the sternum, angled upward. Death would have been swift. Her apron pocket had torn in the struggle. A small silver thimble rolled across the floor and came to rest against Poirot's shoe. He picked it up delicately between gloved fingers. Inside the thimble, a scrap of paper folded twice. He unfolded it with a fingernail. Typed, like the note delivered to Lord Harrington. Lord Harrington stood in the doorway, face the color of old parchment. "My study dagger," he whispered. "I left it on the desk not 20 minutes ago." 20 minutes, Poirot repeated, rising. Then the killer moved swiftly. "Monsieur, you were with me. Who else had access to your study?" Harrington's gaze swept the room, lingering on each face. "Graves has a master key. The family—" "We all know the house." His voice cracked. "But Annie, good God, she was bringing coffee. Why her?" "Lady," Evelyn found her voice. "She screamed my name. I thought—" She pressed a hand to her mouth, smearing lipstick like a wound. Reginald lurched to his feet. Lang's gone. Slipped out the terrace the moment the lights flickered. "I saw him." Lights flickered? Poirot's eyes narrowed. Briefly, Eliza said. "Just before the scream. As though someone tampered with the fuse box in the cellar." She spoke calmly, but her knuckles were white where they gripped the window frame. Poirot turned to Graves. The fuse box, where? Basement, sir. Servant stairs. The butler's eyes flicked to the blood, then away. I was in the pantry, heard nothing until the scream. Poirot addressed the room. Mesdames et messieurs, we will remain here until the police arrive. No one touches anything. Monsieur Reginald, you will sit. You are shaking like a leaf. Reginald collapsed into a chair, brandy sloshing over his cuff. I was pouring coffee when she came in. She set the tray down, then clutched her chest. The dagger was already... He gestured vaguely, unable to finish. Poirot's gaze moved to the coffee tray on the floor. Silver pot, 6 cups, sugar bowl. 1 cup overturned, a brown stain spreading like an accusation. He lifted the pot, still warm. Inside, the coffee smelled faintly of almonds. Cyanide? Lady Evelyn whispered. No. Bitter almonds are also a note of good coffee when over-roasted. Poirot set the pot down. But we will test. Now the sequence. Annie enters with fresh coffee, the lights flicker. She sets the tray, turns, and the dagger is plunged into her heart. Yet no one saw the killer. Silence. The fire popped, sending up a shower of sparks. Eliza spoke. I saw movement. By the gramophone, a shadow, tall. Then the lights went out for a second. When they came back, Annie was falling. Tall, Poirot repeated. Monsieur Lang is tall. Monsieur Graves also. Monsieur Reginald? He studied the young man's shaking hands. You are not tall, but you were closest to the tray. Reginald's head snapped up. I was pouring, damn you. My back was turned. Yet you knelt beside her first, Poirot observed mildly. Your cuffs are blood-stained. I tried to help her. Reginald's voice rose to a shout. She was gurgling. God, the sound. Enough! Lord Harrington's command cut through the room like a whip. Poirot, what the devil is happening? First threats, now murder in my own house? Poirot held up the scrap from the thimble. The first of 3, it says. A promise or a warning? Someone plays a game, my lord, and the board is your household. He moved to the gramophone. The record still spun, needle scratching the label. He lifted the arm. The label read, Nocturne in C-sharp minor, Chopin. But the voice that had spoken earlier, distorted female, was not Chopin. Someone had overlaid a recording, perhaps on the B-side. Curious, Poirot murmured. The message about blood under the Moonstone, was that meant for Annie or for us? Graves returned, face grim. Constable's on his way, sir. Roads are data bad. Fog's thick as pea soup. Maybe an hour. An hour, Poirot echoed. Then we have time. Monsieur Graves, you will show me the fuse box. Lady Evelyn, you will remain here with the others. No one leaves this room. The butler led him down a narrow servant stair, the air growing colder with each step. The basement was a warren of stone corridors lit by bare bulbs that swung gently, though there was no draft. The fuse box was a metal cabinet on the wall, door ajar. Inside, 1 fuse had been removed and replaced upside down. Sabotage, Graves said flatly. Simple enough. Anyone could do it. Poirot examined the floor. A single footprint in the dust, small, narrow, a woman's shoe. But beside it, something glinted. A sapphire earring, the mate to those in Lady Evelyn's ears. Curious, Poirot said again. Madame was upstairs, yet her earring travels to the cellar. Graves' eyes widened. Perhaps it fell earlier. She was down here this afternoon inspecting linen. Inspecting linen, Poirot repeated. At what hour? 3:00, sir. With Mrs. Danvers, the housekeeper. They returned upstairs. In the hall, Poirot paused beneath a portrait of Sir Gervase Harrington, the mad ancestor who had hanged himself. The painted eyes seemed to follow him. On the floor beneath the portrait, a faint smear of blood already drying. Annie's blood, Graves asked. No. Too high on the wall. Poirot touched the smear, still tacky. This is fresh. Someone brushed against the portrait after the murder. Back in the drawing room, tension had thickened to a palpable weight. Lady Evelyn sat rigid, one hand clutching her throat where the matching earring should have been. Reginald had found the brandy decanter and was making steady progress. Eliza stood by the fireplace, staring into the flames as though answers might rise with the smoke. Poirot held up the sapphire. "Madam, you are missing something?" Lady Evelyn's hand flew to her ear. It must have fallen in the struggle. You were on the chaise longue," Poirot pointed out, 10 feet from the body. "And the struggle was brief." "I don't remember," she said faintly. "Everything happened so fast." Lord Harrington's face darkened. "Evelyn, were you in the cellar this afternoon?" "With Mrs. Danvers, yes. The linen—" Her voice caught. "Archibald, you cannot think—" "I think," Harrington said heavily, "that someone in this house is trying to destroy me. First the brakes, now this. Poirot, what the devil do we do?" "We wait for the police," Poirot said. "But we also observe. Monsieur Lang has not returned. We will search for him." "Monsieur Graves, the terrace doors, were they locked before the murder?" "Bolted, sir. From the inside. Then Monsieur Lang either unbolted them himself or someone did it for him." Poirot turned to Reginald. "You said he slipped out when the lights flickered. Did you see him leave?" Reginald shook his head. "Just a shape, tall, coat flapping. Then the doors were open and the fog came in." Poirot moved to the French doors. The bolt was thrown back, but on the terrace flagstones a single set of footprints led away into the mist, then vanished, as though the fog had swallowed them whole. "Curious," Poirot said for the third time. "Footprints that begin but do not end. Either Monsieur Lang has learned to fly or someone carried him." A gasp from Eliza. "Carried? You mean he's dead, injured, hiding?" Poirot shrugged. "We will search the grounds when the constable arrives. For now, we return to the room." As they filed back inside, Poirot noticed something new. The moonstone in the chandelier's central drop had cracked, a hairline fracture running through its heart. No one else seemed to have seen it. He made a mental note. The next hour passed in brittle silence, broken only by the wind and the occasional sob from Lady Evelyn. Reginald finished the brandy and started on the port. Eliza paced like a caged leopard. Lord Harrington stood at the window staring into the fog as though it might yield up his enemy. At 1:17 a.m., headlights pierced the mist. The local constable, a stout man named Hargreaves with a mustache like a yard broom, arrived with 2 subordinates and a doctor. They tramped in, bringing the smell of wet wool and authority. Hargreaves took one look at the body and whistled. "Murder, eh? In Lord Harrington's own house. This'll be in the papers by morning." "Discretion, constable," Poirot said smoothly. "The family is distressed." Hargreaves grunted, then began the tedious business of questions. Poirot watched the reactions. Lady Evelyn's fluttering hands, Reginald's defiance, Eliza's cool detachment. When Hargreaves asked about Lang, Lord Harrington's face went gray. "Find him," he ordered. "Search the grounds, the tower, every room. If he's fled, he's the killer." The search began. Poirot accompanied Hargreaves to the terrace. The footprints had filled with fog water, but something else caught his eye. A scrap of dark wool caught on the rose trellis, and beneath it a single gold cufflink engraved with the initials V.L. Lang's, Harrington said grimly. He was wearing them at dinner. They followed the trellis around the house to the kitchen garden. There, in the soft earth of the herb bed, the footprints reappeared. Deeper now, as though carrying weight. They led to the old well, its mouth covered by a rusted iron grate. Hargreaves shone his torch. The grate had been moved aside. Below, in the blackness, something pale floated. Lang's face stared up at them, eyes wide, mouth open in a silent scream. His throat had been cut ear to ear. "The second of three," Poirot murmured, remembering the note. Hargreaves swore. "2 murders in one night. Well needs Scotland Yard." Poirot looked up at the tower. The moon had emerged fully now, bathing the pale stone in cold light. High above, in the octagonal room at the summit, a light flickered once, then went out. "Constable," Poirot said quietly, "before you call London, we will ascend the Moonstone Tower. I think the third act awaits us there." Chapter 3. The First Shadows of Doubt. The staircase to the Moonstone Tower spiraled upward like the inside of a nautilus shell. Narrow, windowless, lit only by the constable's torch and the occasional guttering candle in a wall sconce. Each step was worn into a shallow scoop by centuries of feet, and the air grew colder, damper, tasting of iron and old secrets. Poirot climbed with the measured tread of a man who trusted neither haste nor darkness, his gloved hand brushing the rough stone for balance. Behind him, Constable Hargreaves wheezed. Lord Harrington's breathing was ragged with more than exertion. At the top, a low oak door bound with iron straps barred the way. The lock was new, a Yale, its brass gleaming. Graves had produced the key from a ring at his belt, but when he inserted it, the mechanism turned with a soft, oiled click. Already unlocked. "Someone's been here before us," Poirot murmured. The door swung inward on well-greased hinges. The octagonal room beyond was smaller than expected, no more than 12 feet across, its walls lined with shelves of dusty grimoires and astronomical charts. A single round window faced north, framing the moon like a coin pressed into black velvet. In the center stood a mahogany pedestal, and upon it, empty velvet indentation where the great moonstone should have rested. "Gone," Harrington said hoarsely. "The family stone. Worth £20,000 and priceless besides." Poirot's torch swept the floor, scuff marks in the dust, 2 sets, one heavy, broad, the other lighter, narrow-heeled. A smear of blood, still wet, led from the pedestal to the window. The casement was unlatched, a draft stirring the charts. Hargreaves leaned out, dropped sheer to the courtyard. No ladder, no rope. "Yet the stone is gone," Poirot said, "and blood has been spilled. Curious." He knelt, touched the smear. Not arterial, someone cut themselves in haste. "See the drag marks?" The stone was wrapped in cloth, carried thus. A glint beneath the pedestal, a torn scrap of black silk monogrammed E.H. Lady Evelyn's scarf, Poirot recognized at once. Downstairs, the house had become a hive of subdued panic. Footmen barred doors, maids huddled in the kitchen, whispering. In the crimson drawing room, the body of Annie still lay where she had fallen, a constable standing guard. Lady Evelyn sat wrapped in a shawl, eyes red-rimmed. Reginald had passed out in an armchair, an empty decanter at his feet. Eliza stood apart, arms folded, watching the door like a cat at a mouse-hole. Poirot entered with Harrington and Hargreaves. "Mesdames, messieurs," he announced, "we have a theft to add to murder. The Moonstone is taken from the tower, and Monsieur Lang," he paused, letting the silence stretch, "is dead in the well. Throat cut." Lady Evelyn gave a small animal sound. Eliza's composure cracked for the first time. She pressed a fist to her mouth. Reginald stirred but did not wake. Hargreaves cleared his throat. "I've telephoned Scotland Yard. Inspector Japs, catching the milk train. Until then, no one leaves." Poirot held up the silk scrap. "Madame, this is yours." Lady Evelyn stared. "My scarf. Yes, I wore it at dinner. It must have snagged in the tower, 60 feet above the ground?" Poirot's tone was gentle, relentless. "And your earring in the cellar, your scarf in the tower. You travel widely tonight. I never—" She stopped, glanced at her husband. Harrington's face was stone. Eliza spoke. "Uncle, the safe in your study, check it." Harrington strode out, Poirot following. In the study, the safe stood open as before, but now the velvet pouch of sovereigns was gone, and in its place lay a single playing card, the Queen of Spades, eyes scratched out with a pin. "Black Queen," Harrington muttered. "My mother's warning sign. She used it when she knew someone meant harm." Poirot turned the card over. On the back, in the same typewriter. Back in the drawing room, Poirot arranged the suspects in a semicircle. The fire had burned low. Shadows lurched across the crimson walls. "We reconstruct," he began. "At 11:40, Lord Harrington and I leave for the study. At 11:55, lights flicker. Fuse tampered in cellar. At 12 hours, Annie enters with coffee. Lights go out for 3 seconds. When they return, she is stabbed. Simultaneously, someone ascends the tower, removes the moonstone, descends, disposes of Lang in the well. All within minutes, ergo more than one hand." He paced. Monsieur Lang's cufflink on the trellis, his footprints to the well, yet the well grate is heavy iron. One man could not lift it alone. Someone helped, then betrayed him. Reginald roused, bleary. "Lang was alive when I last saw him, slipping out the terrace." "Alive, yes," Poirot said, "but perhaps not free. Consider, the killer needed Lang's body in the well to cast suspicion. Lang was lured or forced." Elisa's voice cut like flint. "Victor was having an affair with Aunt Evelyn. Everyone knew. Perhaps Uncle discovered it tonight." Harrington flinched as though struck. Lady Evelyn buried her face in her hands. Poirot held up a hand. "Motives abound. Monsieur Reginald, gambling debts paid by selling family bonds from the safe. Mademoiselle Elisa, disinherited yet seen near the armory where the dagger was kept. Madame, betrayal. Monsieur Graves." He turned to the butler, who stood by the door, face impassive. "Your father was dismissed by Lord Harrington 30 years ago. You remained in service, loyalty, or long revenge?" Graves met his gaze steadily. "I served faithfully, sir." Poirot nodded. "We shall see." He produced the thimble note, the first of 3. Annie was not the intended victim. Note the apron pocket torn in struggle. The true target wore something similar. "Lady Evelyn, your gown is midnight blue, Annie's apron black. In the dark, a mistake." Lady Evelyn shuddered. "Someone meant to kill me? Or to warn," Poirot said. "The moonstone gone, Lang dead, the Black Queen left. A pattern emerges. Family treasures, family betrayals." He moved to the gramophone, lifted the record. Beneath it, a second disc, homemade, wax. He set the needle, a woman's voice, distorted. The needle scratched to silence. Elisa laughed, a brittle sound. "The house itself speaks. We're all mad." Poirot removed the wax disc carefully. Technology, not ghosts. Someone recorded this earlier, hid it here. But why announce a third murder? Hargreaves shifted. "To keep us jumping at shadows." "Exactement," Poirot said. "Red herrings. The cufflink planted, the scarf torn deliberately. But one clue does not lie." He held up a tiny glass vial found in the tower dust. "Laudanum, enough to drug a man senseless. Lang was unconscious when his throat was cut. No struggle in the well. The killer is merciful. Or efficient. Dawn was still hours away. Outside, the fog pressed against the windows like a living thing. Inside, suspicion coiled tighter. Poirot addressed them all. "Until Inspector Japp arrives, we remain together. No one sleeps alone. The third strike comes at dawn. Let us be ready." He did not add what his gray cells whispered, that the third victim might already be chosen and that the moonstone's absence was not the theft, but the bait. Chapter 4. Echoes from the Past. The house slept uneasily. Constables patrolled the corridors. Every creak of the old timbers sounded like a footstep. Poirot, sleepless, sat in the library with a single lamp, the stolen moonstone's velvet indentation before him like an accusation. At 3:17 a.m. the door opened. Eliza Thorne slipped in, wrapped in a man's dressing gown, hair loose down her back. "You should rest, mademoiselle. I can't." She closed the door. "There's something you must see." She led him to the west wing, past suits of armor that gleamed dully. A concealed panel behind a tapestry opened onto a narrow stair. "Sir Gervas's bolt hole," she whispered, "leads to the tower." The stair ended in a tiny chamber directly beneath the Moonstone room. Dust lay thick, but fresh prints marred it. Small, healed. On a dusty table, a typewriter, ribbon half used, and a stack of cream notepaper matching the death threats. "Annie's station," Eliza said. She could type. "I found this an hour ago." Poirot lifted a sheet. The keys were worn. Monstone. The Moonstone Tower spelled in overuse. "Annie typed the notes?" he murmured. "Or someone forced her." Eliza opened a drawer. Inside, a locket with a miniature of Lord Harrington, young, smiling, and a lock of dark hair, Lang's hair. And look, a torn railway ticket, London to York, dated yesterday. Poirot's eyes gleamed. Lang came from London with purpose. Blackmail? They descended. In the hall, Graves waited, face gaunt in the lamplight. "Sir, the dogs are restless. Something in the crypt." The crypt lay beneath the chapel, reached by a iron-bound door. Inside, stone sarcophagi of Harrington ancestors lined the walls. One lid was askew. Poirot and Graves heaved it aside. Inside, not bones but ledgers, decades of accounts, forged signatures, cooked books. A final entry in Harrington's hand. VL paid 10,000 silence re salon fraud. Debt remains. Lang was bleeding him, Poirot said, but the Moonstone, priceless. Why steal it? Graves produced a crumpled note from his pocket. "Found in Annie's apron, sir, after you left." Poirot's mind raced. Annie lured to the crypt, forced to type, then killed in the drawing room to silence her. But the Moonstone, still missing. Dawn stained the windows crimson. The third strike loomed. Chapter 5. Threads unraveling, dawn bled across the moors like a fresh wound, turning fog to rose gold. In the crimson drawing room, the bodies had been removed, but the air still reeked of blood and candle smoke. Poirot stood at the window, hands clasped behind his back, watching constables comb the lawn for the missing Moonstone. Inspector Japp's train was overdue. The telephone lines were down, cut clean at the pole. Someone had planned for isolation. Lord Harrington entered first, unshaven, eyes hollow. "Poirot, the crypt ledgers. My God, if the press—" "Will not," Poirot cut in. "Not yet. Sit, my lord. We reconstruct the night with precision." He arranged the remaining players like chess pieces. Lady Evelyn on the chaise, wrapped in sable despite the fire. Reginald hung over, nursing black coffee. Eliza by the gramophone, arms folded. Graves at the door, rigid as a guardsman. Two constables flanked the French windows. Poirot began with the typewriter in the bolt hole. Mademoiselle Eliza discovered it at 3. The ribbon matches every note. Annie typed them, willingly or under duress. But why kill the goose? He produced the locket. "Lang's hair, your photograph, my lord." A lover's token? Or evidence of the salon fraud? Harrington flushed. Lang held the proof. "I paid to keep it quiet." Lady Evelyn's cup rattled in its saucer. "You paid with my sapphires, Archibald." And still he wanted more. Reginald laughed bitterly. "So the noble lord buys silence while I'm cut off for a few bad bets at White's." Poirot ignored him. "At 11:40, his lordship and I go to the study. At 11:50, fuse is tampered, cellar earring. At 11:55, lights flicker. At midnight, Annie enters with coffee, stabbed. Simultaneously, Moonstone is taken from tower, scarf fragment. Lang is drugged with laudanum, carried to well, throat cut. All within 10 minutes, impossible for one person. He paced, therefore conspiracy. But who benefits? He laid clues on the coffee table like cards. Red herrings, he said, and truths. The earring, dropped deliberately to implicate Madame. The scarf, torn on the pedestal to point upward. The cufflink, planted. But the laudanum vial has fingerprints, small, delicate, a woman's. Lady Evelyn shrank back. Yet, Poirot continued, the well grate weighs 200 pounds, lifted by 2 men, or 1 very strong. Monsieur Graves, your shoulders are broad. Graves did not blink. I was in the pantry, sir. Were you? Poirot produced a silver button, found beside the well, from a butler's coat. One missing from your sleeve. Graves glanced down. The gap was there. It tore yesterday. Convenient. Poirot turned to Reginald. You claim you saw Lang leave, yet your shoes, size 10, match the heavy prints to the well, and the cufflink was found in Lang's pocket after death, planted by you. Reginald paled. I never, Eliza interrupted. Uncle changed his will 3 days ago. I have the draft. She produced a folded sheet from her dressing gown. Leaves everything to a trust administered by Graves. Reginald and I get annuities. Aunt Evelyn nothing. Harrington lunged. Lies! Poirot restrained him. The draft is typed on the bolt-hole machine. Forgery? Or truth? Lady Evelyn stood swaying. I'll confess if it ends this. Victor and I plan to run. The Moonstone was our ticket. But murder... She sank back, weeping. Poirot's voice softened. Madame, you dropped the earring yourself to create confusion. You typed the notes to frighten your husband into flight. But Annie discovered you in the bolt hole. She had to die. He turned to Graves. You carried Lang, drugged, to the well. Reginald helped, thinking to frame Lang. But you cut his throat to silence him forever. Reginald surged up. That's monstrous. Non. Poirot held up the laudanum vial. Your fingerprints also, monsieur. You supplied the drug, for your own habit, perhaps. Graves used it. Graves moved like lightning, snatching a constable's truncheon. He swung at Poirot, who ducked. The second constable tackled him. The truncheon clattered across the floor, revealing a hidden blade. Harrington stared at his butler of 30 years. Why? Graves spat blood. My father hanged himself after your dismissal. You promised recompense, never paid. The will was real. I forged the draft to force your hand. Poirot shook his head. But you killed Annie needlessly. And Lang. The Moonstone. Where? Graves smiled, teeth red. Safe. Where the third strike will never find it. Outside, the sun cleared the fog. A constable shouted from the courtyard, Sir! In the fountain, the Moonstone. It lay in the frozen maiden's urn, wrapped in black silk, blood-stained. The third strike had been the stone itself, sacrificed to end the curse. But as Graves was led away, Poirot's gray cells whispered. One thread still dangled. The typewriter ribbon held one more secret. He pocketed it carefully. Chapter 6. The Hidden Vault. The house exhaled. With Graves in cuffs and the Moonstone recovered, the constables relaxed their vigil, believing the storm had broken. Poirot did not. He stood alone in the library, the blood-stained silk spread beneath a green banker's lamp. The stone itself, palm-sized, opalescent, veined with blue fire, rested on a velvet cushion like a sleeping heart. Yet something itched at the edge of his perception, a discord in the symphony of clues. At 6:47 a.m., the telephone lines crackled back to life. Inspector Japp's voice barked down the wire from York Station, delayed by a derailment, arriving by motor within the hour. Poirot thanked him, hung up, then returned to the stone. He turned it slowly. On the underside, etched with a diamond point, fresh as yesterday's news, a lover's vow or a death sentence. Footsteps in the corridor. Lady Evelyn appeared in the doorway, still in her sable wrap, face stripped of powder and pretense. Monsieur, she said, voice raw, may I see it? Poirot stepped aside. She lifted the stone with reverent fingers, tears glittering. Victor promised we'd sail to Madeira. Sell this, start again. She laughed, a cracked sound. Instead, he's in the well and him in hell. Madame, Poirot said gently, the etching is new, done after the theft. By you? She flinched. No. Victor carried a stylus for his sketches. He must have... After drugging himself with laudanum? No. Poirot took the stone, wrapped it. Someone wishes us to believe the lovers stole it together. But Lang was dead before the tower was breached. He led her back to the drawing room. The others waited, Harrington pacing, Reginald sullen over coffee, Eliza examining the typewriter ribbon with clinical interest. 2 constables guarded the door. Graves had been locked in the wine cellar, trussed like a Michaelmas goose. Poirot placed the Moonstone on the table. We have confession, motive, weapon, yet the gray cells protest. Too many hands, too neat a knot. He produced the ribbon. Mademoiselle Eliza, you said the bolt-hole machine typed the notes. Observe. He threaded the ribbon, struck a key. The letter M jammed, printing double. Every note had a telltale double M. Moonstone, midnight, murder. But the Black Queen card, the well note, clean. 2 machines, Poirot announced. One in the bolt hole for terror, one hidden for precision. Eliza's eyes widened. The estate office. Uncle keeps a Remington there. They trooped to the estate office. Oak desk, ledgers, a typewriter beneath a dust cover. The ribbon was new, the M pristine. Poirot typed, "The tower falls." Perfect. Harrington sagged. My private machine, only I... No. Poirot lifted the cover fully. Beneath, a narrow drawer, false bottom. Inside, a leather folder. He opened it. Photographs, dozens. Lady Evelyn and Lang in compromising embrace. Garden, motorcar, a London hotel. Dates stamped, and letters in Lang's hand. Demands for 50,000 or exposure. Harrington's face went purple. That bastard. Blackmailed you both, Poirot finished. But the Moonstone was never for sale. It was leverage. He turned to Lady Evelyn. You etched the lover's mark to frame a dead man. You typed the clean notes on this machine. You moved the stone to the fountain after Graves hid it in the crypt to be found and end the hunt. She backed away. I only wanted the scandal buried with Victor. Reginald snorted. While I take the blame for everything? Father's perfect scapegoat, Poirot rounded on him. You supplied the laudanum, oui, but you did not kill. You watched, paralyzed by debt and brandy. He faced Eliza. And you, mademoiselle, forged the will to force your uncle's hand. But murder? Beyond. You. He knelt, pried up a floorboard beneath the desk, a small cavity. Inside, a velvet pouch, heavy. He spilled sovereigns, stolen from the safe, beside a second dagger, twin to the murder weapon, blade clean. The real spare, Poirot said. Graves took the decoy from the study. This one waited here. Harrington stared at the coins. My emergency fund. Gone. Return, Poirot corrected. By the true puppet master. He produced a final clue, a brass key, old, ornate, found in Graves' pocket. Not to any door in this house. Eliza gasped. The family vault. Under the chapel. Great-grandfather's tomb. They descended again, torches cutting the crypt gloom. The newest sarcophagus, Sir Gervais, 1652, stood slightly askew. The key fit, the lid ground open. Inside, not bones, but a nest of oilskin packets. Bonds, share certificates, a map of Ceylon rubber plantations, proof of Harrington's fraud. And atop it all, a wax cylinder for the gramophone, labeled in red ink. Third strike. Poirot lifted it, the final message. Played at dawn, perhaps from the tower itself. But dawn has come and gone. He looked at each face in the flickering light. Someone orchestrated every death, every theft, every confession. Graves was tool, not master. The Moonstone returned, the lovers framed, the fraud exposed, all to ruin Lord Harrington utterly. But who benefits if the Lord falls and the heir is disgraced? Silence. Then Eliza whispered, the trust. If Uncle and Reginald are ruined, the estate passes to the next in line, Poirot finished. But there is no next. Unless... He turned the map over. On the back, in faded ink, a family tree. A branch cut off in 1901, Archibald's elder brother, Eliza's father, disinherited for scandal. Beside the severed name, a single word, Moonstone. Eliza met his gaze, steady. My father swore the stone would avenge him. I thought it superstition. Poirot closed the lid. You typed the clean notes. You etched the lover's mark. You moved the stone to the fountain. You planned every strike to expose, not kill, until Annie stumbled on the vault. Eliza smiled, small and terrible. She was collateral, like Lang, like Graves' pride. Harrington lunged, constables restrained him. Lady Evelyn wept silently. Reginald stared at his cousin as though seeing her for the first time. Poirot pocketed the cylinder. The third strike was truth, mademoiselle, and truth, like the Moonstone, cuts both ways. Outside, the sun climbed clear of the moors. Jap's motor roared up the drive. The vault door clanged shut behind them, echoing like a judge's gavel. Chapter 7. False Trails. Inspector Jap arrived like a North Country squall. Boots thudding, mustache bristling, bowler hat clamped under one arm. He took in the crypt, the vault, the Moonstone on its cushion, and the 5 pale faces with the weary satisfaction of a man who had seen every variation of human folly. Morning, Poirot. Looks like you've gift-wrapped the lot. Cousin Eliza, eh? Revenge served colder than Yorkshire. Pudding. Poirot lifted a cautionary finger. Non, mon ami. Gift-wrapped, yes, but the ribbon is knotted wrong. Observe. He led Jap upstairs to the estate office. The Remington typewriter sat innocent beneath its cover. Poirot struck the M key. Crisp. Single. Then he produced the bolt-hole ribbon, threaded it into the machine, struck again. Double M. Faint but unmistakable. 2 machines, Jap grunted. So the clean notes came from here. Eliza's work. Appearances, Poirot said. But the bolt-hole machine was used for terror, the office machine for precision. Yet the wax cylinder, the third strike, was cut on a third device. See the groove width? He held the cylinder to the light. Wider. An Edison, not a Columbia. Where is it? They searched. Nothing in the office, the drawing room, the tower. Jap scratched his head. Hidden, then burned. Case closed. Poirot's eyes gleamed. Closed. When the true killer still breathes free? He gathered the household in the great hall beneath the Cavalier portrait. Sunlight slanted through high windows, dust motes dancing like guilty secrets. Graves, wrists cuffed, stood between 2 constables. Eliza sat straight-backed, defiance in every line. Lady Evelyn clutched a rosary. Reginald nursed a fresh brandy. Harrington looked 10 years older. Poirot began softly. We have confessions, motives, clues, yet each collapses under weight. Mademoiselle Eliza forged the will, true, but the typewriter ribbon in the bolt hole was changed yesterday. The old spool vanished. Who changed it? Eliza frowned. I never... Exactly. Madame Evelyn etched the lover's mark on the Moonstone, true. But the stylus was Lang's, found in his pocket, bloodless. Who placed it there after death? Lady Evelyn shook her head, bewildered. Monsieur Graves carried Lang to the well, true. But the laudanum vial bears Reginald's prints and a woman's. Whose? Reginald opened his mouth, closed it. Poirot paced. The Moonstone in the fountain wrapped in Madame's scarf, yet the scarf was torn in the tower hours earlier. Impossible unless 2 scarves exist. They do not. He stopped before Graves. You confessed to silence Annie. Yet the dagger that killed her was wiped clean of poison. Laudanum is oily, leaves residue. The blade was pristine. You used the spare dagger from the vault, not the study one. Graves' mask slipped. No. You are pawn, not king. Poirot whirled to Reginald. You supplied laudanum, but you were unconscious by midnight, witnessed by the footman. You could not lift the well grate. Reginald flushed. I was foxed, not dead. Poirot ignored him, facing Harrington. "Milord, the salon map in the vault, your handwriting, but the ink is fresh. You added the family tree branch last night to implicate Eliza." Harrington's jaw worked. Preposterous. Is it? Poirot produced a fountain pen from Harrington's pocket, uncapped it. The ink matched. You staged the vault discovery to frame your niece, knowing her father's grudge. Lady Evelyn gasped. Archibald, no! Poirot raised a hand. But the wax cylinder defeats you, the voice. Distorted, yes, but the cadence. Graves, repeat after me. The tower falls at dawn. Graves obeyed, voice flat. The rhythm matched the cylinder exactly. Japp's eyes widened. The butler recorded it. Non, Poirot said. Graves is tone-deaf. Listen, he hummed a bar of Chopin. Graves could not follow. The cylinder voice has perfect pitch. Only one person here sings like a lark. He turned to Eliza. You recorded the message weeks ago, planning exposure. But someone stole the cylinder, recut it with new words, planted it in the vault. Eliza smiled thinly. Then your killer is a ghost. Or a magician, Poirot said, who moved unseen, planted clues, cut lines, tampered with fuses. The one person never suspected because they served, silent, invisible. He faced the footman who had guarded the drawing room, a slight young man, freckled, eyes downcast. Thomas, is it not? You changed the ribbon. You carried the spare dagger. You etched the stone with Lang's stylus while the body cooled. You lifted the grate alone. Country boy, strong as an ox. Thomas bolted. Japp tackled him at the door. A search revealed a wax cutter in his pocket, a second moonstone. Paste but convincing, wrapped in oilskin. Graves' nephew, Japp read from a letter. Dismissed servant's son. Infiltrated 6 months ago. Poirot nodded. Revenge through service. Every clue a false trail to the family. The third strike was to be Eliza's arrest at dawn. Then the real Moonstone vanished forever. Harrington sank to a chair. My God. Poirot lifted the true stone. Return by honor, my lord. The false trails end here. Outside, rooks wheeled against a clearing sky. The tower stood serene. Secrets bled into daylight. Chapter 8. The Second Strike. The hall still rang with Thomas' muffled curses as Japp hauled him away. Poirot stood amid the wreckage of false trails, the true Moonstone cradled in his palm like a cold star. Sunlight poured through the high windows, merciless on every face. Yet the air felt heavier, as though the house itself waited for one final breath. Harrington broke the silence. Then it's finished. The boy acted alone. Non, my lord, Poirot said quietly. Thomas planted clues, cut lines, moved the stone. But he did not kill Annie. The dagger entered from above. Thomas is 5'6". The wound required height. And Lang's throat was cut left to right by a right-handed killer standing behind. Thomas is left-handed. Observe, he lifted the footman's abandoned cap. The peak curved left. Japp scratched his chin. Accomplice or master? Poirot turned the Moonstone. The lover's etching caught the light. EH plus VL, but beneath fainter, a second set of scratches. A tiny cross, almost invisible. A signal. The second strike is not past, it is now. He moved to the grandfather clock that dominated the hall. Its face read 7:12. The pendulum swung with ponderous dignity. Poirot opened the glass, stopped the swing. Silence fell like a blade. Inside, he said. Jap peered, taped to the weights. A wax cylinder, identical to the vault find but labeled in red. Second strike, play at 7:15. The company froze. Lady Evelyn crossed herself. Eliza's eyes narrowed to slits. Reginald set down his glass, suddenly sober. Poirot lifted the cylinder free. Thomas prepared this before arrest. Someone else must play it. He carried it to the gramophone in the drawing room. The needle trembled as he set it down. At 7:15 exactly the clock chimed, though the pendulum was stilled. A hidden mechanism. The cylinder revolved. A man's voice, distorted but recognizable. Graves. The needle scratched to silence. Every head turned to the crimson drawing room hearth. The fire had been laid but not lit. Fresh logs stacked like a pyre. Poirot knelt, pushed the logs aside. Beneath, wrapped in oilskin, a second dagger, blood-crusted, and a folded sheet. He unfolded it. A fresh will dated yesterday, leaving the estate to charity. Signature, Archibald Harrington, witnessed by Graves and Thomas. Harrington lunged. Forgery. Non, Poirot said. Your pen, your ink, signed under duress. See the tremor? He pointed to the A, shaky where it usually looped bold. Eliza laughed, sharp. So Graves blackmailed you into disinheriting us all. Harrington's face crumpled. He had the salon proofs. Said he'd ruin me unless I signed. Thomas was his insurance. Jap whistled. Butler and footman in league. But who struck the blows? Poirot replaced the dagger beside its twin from the vault. 2 daggers, 2 killers. Annie died in the drawing room. Lang in the well. Different heights, different hands. Yet one mind. He faced the assembly. The second strike is not murder, it is ruin. The will exposes fraud, disinheritance, scandal. The Moonstone was bait to keep us chasing shadows while the real weapon was ink. Reginald stepped forward, eyes wild. Then him out? Everything to bloody charity? Unless, Poirot said, we find the true master before the third cylinder plays. A crash overhead. The chandelier trembled. Dust sifted from the ceiling rose. The tower, Eliza breathed. They ran. The spiral stair echoed with frantic feet. At the top, the octagonal room stood empty, window open to the morning. On the pedestal, a gramophone, ancient, horn like a flower. A third cylinder spun, needle descending. Poirot reached it as the voice began. His own, recorded somehow. Poirot looked out the window. Below in the courtyard, constables milled. Beyond, the fountain where the Moonstone had been found now spouted crimson, blood mixed with water. Mon Dieu, he whispered. The second strike was diversion. The third is now. He turned. Behind them, the door had locked. The key was gone. From the gramophone horn, a soft hiss, then gas. Chapter 9. The Gathering Storm. The tower room filled with the sweet, cloying stench of coal gas. The horn of the ancient gramophone hissed like a serpent. The cylinder still spun, Poirot's recorded voice looping in a mocking whisper. The third strike is truth. The door was locked from the outside, the keyhole stuffed with paper. Below, the courtyard fountain ran red. Jap hurled his shoulder against the oak. It shuddered but held. Solid as the Bank of England, he roared. Poirot's eyes streamed, but the gray cells burned clear. He snatched the Moonstone from his pocket, wrapped it in his handkerchief, and smashed the north window. Glass exploded outward. Cold moor air rushed in, diluting the poison. He leaned out, bellowed in French and English. Constables! Ladder! The tower, vice! Harrington coughed, face purple. The gas pipe runs behind the wainscot. He staggered to the wall, tore at a panel. A brass valve gleamed. Reginald, suddenly useful, seized a bronze candlestick and hammered the valve shut. The hiss died. Eliza, calm amid chaos, produced a hairpin, knelt at the lock. Sir Gervas's door, old mechanism, click. The tongue retracted. Jap kicked it open. They spilled onto the landing like survivors of a shipwreck. Down the spiral stair, two at a time. In the courtyard, constables stared up, mouths agape. The fountain's maiden now poured pure blood, fresh, steaming. A constable retched. Poirot knelt. The stone basin was painted crimson inside, but the water itself clear. "Pig's blood," he announced. From the kitchen, piped through the fountainhead, someone turned the stopcock. Jap wiped his brow. "Third strike, scare us witless, then vanish with the real stone?" "Non." Poirot held up the moonstone, still wrapped in his handkerchief. "This is the true one. The paste replica was Thomas' decoy. But the blood—" He pointed to footprints leading from the fountain to the chapel door, already fading as the sun dried them. Inside the chapel, dawn light filtered through stained glass, painting the stone floor in rubies and sapphires. The family pews were empty. At the altar, the sarcophagus of Sir Gervais stood open again. Inside, no ledgers now, but a body. Graves, throat cut ear to ear, eyes staring at the vaulted ceiling. In his rigid hand, a note pinned by the second dagger, typed on the office Remington, ink still wet. Harrington fell to his knees. He was locked in the wine cellar. Jap swore. Someone let him out, marched him here, slit his throat, then staged the gas, the blood, the cylinder. Poirot examined the wound. Left-handed slash. "Thomas is in custody. Who remains?" They turned as one. Lady Evelyn stood in the chapel doorway, sable coat unbuttoned, hair wild, a straight razor in her gloved hand, blood dripping from the blade. "Evelyn," Harrington whispered. She smiled, serene. "You took everything, Archibald, my youth, my name, my future. Victor promised escape. When he died, I decided the house would die with him." Eliza stepped forward. "You killed Graves? Graves killed Victor? On your order, Archibald, to silence the blackmail. I merely returned the favor." She gestured to the razor. "Thomas was my tool. The cylinders, the blood, the gas, all to herd you, here to watch the tower fall in scandal." Jap moved to seize her. She lifted the razor to her own throat. "One step, and I join Victor." Poirot's voice cut like ice. "Madam, the third strike is truth, yes, but truth is a mirror. Look." He held up the moonstone. In its heart, reflected in the chapel's colored light, the lover's etching EH plus VL shimmered, then dissolved. The surface was flawless. "Illusion," Poirot said. "The etching was acid, temporary, like your revenge. The stone is clean. So must you be." Lady Evelyn's hand wavered. The razor clattered to the flagstones. Constables seized her. As she was led away, she looked back once. "The tower falls," she repeated softly. "But not today." Outside, the sun climbed higher. The fountain ran clear again. The moonstone, cradled in Poirot's palm, caught the light and threw it back, pure, cold, eternal. Chapter 10. Moonlight Revelation. The chapel doors stood open to the morning. Rooks wheeled overhead, their cries the only sound on the moor. Poirot walked slowly down the aisle, moonstone in one hand, Lady Evelyn's razor in the other. Behind him, Jap marshaled constables. Harrington, Reginald, and Eliza followed like mourners at a funeral that had not yet begun. Poirot stopped at the altar. Graves' body had been covered with a velvet pall, the blood on the flagstones already darkened to rust. He laid the moonstone on the altar cloth and turned to the assembly. "Mesdames, messieurs," he began, voice soft yet carrying to the rafters, "we have chased shadows through this house of shadows. 3 strikes promised, 3 delivered. Annie's death, Lang's murder, Graves' execution. Yet the hand that wielded the blade was never the mind that planned the game." He lifted the razor. "Madame Evelyn confessed to revenge, to using Thomas and the cylinders. But the razor is clean of her prints, wiped with the same oilskin that wrapped the paste moonstone. She held it for theater, not slaughter. Lady Evelyn, wrists bound, lifted her head. I wanted him ruined, not— Silence, Poirot said gently. You wanted flight with Lang. When he died, you wanted blame. But you did not cut throats. He faced Harrington. My lord, you signed the false will under Graves' gun. You paid blackmail. But you did not kill. Reginald snorted. Then who, little man? The ghost of Sir Gervas? Poirot smiled without humor. Observe the strikes. First, Annie, stabbed in the drawing room. Second, Lang, drugged and slashed at the well. Third, Graves marched to the chapel and executed. Each required strength, height, silence, yet each left a calling card. Typed notes, blood, cylinders. Why announce if not to terrify? He produced the office Remington ribbon. Every clean note came from here, but the bolt hole ribbon changed twice. Someone preserved the terror machine while perfecting the precision one. Eliza stepped forward. I forged the will, yes. I wanted the estate, but I never— Poirot raised a hand. You never killed. You are right-handed. The chapel slash was left. You are 5'4". Annie's wound was from above. You were in the hall when the gas hissed. He turned to the shadows beside the organ. Come out, Monsieur Graves. A groan. The pall over the body stirred. Graves sat up, very much alive, throat wound a clever latex prosthetic, blood corn syrup and cochineal. Constables gasped. Japs swore. Graves stood, shedding the pall. Clever, Monsieur Poirot. The third strike, Poirot said, was your own death. Staged with Thomas Pasteblood, the chapel dagger, the note. You locked us in the tower with gas to buy time, then died to end the hunt. The real Moonstone would vanish with you to South America, passage booked under Thomas' name. Graves smiled, almost admiring. 30 years I served watching him squander what my father built. The salon fraud was mine to expose, but Lang demanded half. When he threatened Evelyn, I cut him. Annie saw the vault. She had to go. Thomas was my legs, Evelyn my shield. He gestured to the Moonstone. That stone is worth a kingdom. With it I retire. Jap moved. Graves produced a derringer from the pall. Back! Poirot did not flinch. You overlooked the tower window, monsieur. The constables below saw you climb down the ivy after locking us in. Your ladder of lies collapses. Graves glanced out. Ropes already encircled the chapel. He lunged for the side door, too late. Constables swarmed. As he was cuffed, Graves looked at Harrington. The tower falls, my lord. In Fleet Street, not stone. Harrington met his gaze. You served me poison for 30 years. I drink it now. Poirot lifted the Moonstone. Sunlight struck it. A rainbow fractured across the chapel walls. The tower stands, he said. Truth is its foundation. Outside, the moor stretched golden under a clearing sky. The fountain ran pure. The Moonstone, returned to its velvet, gleamed like a promise kept.